Howdy. Well, I'm your host, Bill Olson, and today we have another jam-packed episode. I'm actually going to open up the phone lines today a little bit so that I can argue with somebody if they want to argue about something or if they have information. But we're going to start out right away with, remember 5 years ago when Alex Jones was talking about the FEMA camps and everybody was saying he was crazy? And well, of course, we know the FEMA camps exist now, but did you know that when, you know, they drew the line at believing him when he talked about stacks and stacks of coffins. And of course, we know that those are real too. We've seen pictures of them, but now they're officially admitting it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play this little clip. It's about 3 minutes long, but it shows that the Center for Disease Control is, well, they're beginning to panic about Ebola. They don't want to say that publicly, but in the meantime, they've ordered up thousands and thousands of these hermetically sealed, what they call a multi-purpose, it was when you burn them up, what do you call it anyway? Cremation, multi-purpose cremation coffins. I think that's what they call it anyway. Well, it's just amazing how they keep doing the spin doctor dance, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the marijuana issue coming up here in Oregon. But anyway, let's go ahead and play this. If you're ready, we're going to play it. Taiwan is what we're going to put in. And here we go.
New story up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. CDC mandates hermetically sealed caskets for Ebola victims. Revelation follows report of CDC storing thousands of airtight coffin liners in Georgia. The CDC has instructed funeral homes to bury Ebola victims in hermetically sealed caskets. That's what we told folks 5 years ago. A potentially disturbing revelation given reports the federal agency had previously purchased thousands of airtight coffin liners, which were being stored in Madison, Georgia, outside Atlanta. Yahoo News report reveals how the CDC is instructing funeral homes that remains should be cremated or buried promptly in a hermetically sealed casket, which must be secure against the escape of microorganisms and have valid documentation for being airtight. Dallas Institute of Funeral Services Administrator Wayne Cavender said the CDC is worried about an epidemic, but the type of caskets they were recommending were not airtight. These in Georgia are, ladies and gentlemen, and you've got more from your sources. They're calling them a cremation box, right?
They're calling them multifunctional cremation containers, and there's actually a patent on that. You can probably bring it up. There was I can't remember what year it was patented in. I think it was in the 70s.
There it is, multifunctional cremation container. And for cadaver, and it breaks it down, U.S. patent number 08/069, 980, 1995.
Yeah, the thing with Ebola patients is whenever they start getting close to death, though, it's the violent diarrhea, the violent vomiting, and the
violent fluids. Rachel Maddow. We don't talk about bloody diarrhea. It's called a Rachel Maddow. They have violent Rachel Maddow.
Right. So, I mean, if you think about really how to contain it, it would be almost to the point where you would have, before the patients get to the point where they're uncontrollably bleeding.
Before they go to uncontrollable Michael
diarrhea, they really need to be killed, like, before, you know, this is what they're saying is they need to be put in some sort of a casket or possibly quarantined or in some sort of a room with other people, because that's when it really becomes a problem, is towards the end when they're losing body fluids everywhere. So, you know, the reports...
Hey, they say let everybody in. How about we send all the Ebola patients to the White House?
Well, there you go. I mean, who knows what the White House is, you know, obviously the White House isn't doing anything. I mean, Obama's holding meetings with all the African leaders and everything right now, or up at Martha's Vineyard for a long time. It's just like they don't care what's going on, obviously. They're not out there talking about it. And, you know, the organizations that are supposed to be holding the quarantines and helping people out aren't doing anything about it. It's all about fast-tracking vaccines and having something ready by the first of the year. So, I mean, you know the predictions. I mean, they're predicting that in January there could be over 1 million cases of Ebola.
1.4, yeah.
1.4 million cases. So, you know, it's just more of a reason to start taking responsibility for your own health, start cleaning yourself out.
Okay, that was a little short one there. Okay, well, it's kind of obvious what's going on, but it's funny that they, in the background, they've been making all kinds of plans. Like, remember, Obama signed into law that, I think it was an executive directive, but he gave himself the power to detain anybody with a respiratory symptom. They don't even have to have Ebola. They just have to have an elevated fever, respiratory symptom, and then they can be locked up for a month. And that was done before we knew that anybody came to the United States. Well, just kind of a coincidence that they were getting ready. It's like they had, just kind of like 9/11, they had pre-knowledge of what was going to happen. Is this a my hop or a lie hop? Let it happen on purpose or made it happen on purpose? We don't know. But either way, you can't say that they are doing their best when it's supposed to be, the bottom line, Ebola is a level 4, they have to have a level 4 containment for it, is what they say. And everything that's handling it now is level 2. Why do you suppose they're doing that when they have a whole bunch of knowledgeable people that know better? Well, I'm just going to leave that as a question and we'll see what happens. I can't predict the future. In the meantime, the Corbett Report, or Boiling Frogs Post, the Corbett Report, James Corbett, they've issued it's kind of a funny little thing. It's a little over 2 minutes, a little under 3 minutes. It's called the Doublespeak Dictionary. Remember 1984? Yeah, peace is, or what's that? War is peace. Victory is, or anyway, it's so crazy I can't even think of them when I'm trying to. I can't be that crazy. So go ahead and play that one, and I'll come back in a few minutes.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists. We have with us 6 from the Afghanistan freedom fighters.
Member for a long time and was actually a director for some period of time. I never mentioned that when I was campaigning for re-election back home in Wyoming.
I intend to keep this promise. If you like your doctor, you'll be able to keep your doctor. If you like your health care plan, you'll be able to keep your health care plan.
Years ahead, Libya could become a peaceful democracy, or it could face protracted civil war, or it could descend into chaos. Gaddafi should put the well-being and the interests of his own people first and help facilitate a democratic transition that will meet the aspirations of the Libyan people.
I don't believe that anybody is above the law. On the other hand, I also have a belief that we need to look forward as opposed to looking backwards.
We're all clear that any referendum vote in Crimea this week will be illegal, illegitimate, and will not be recognized by the international community.
I'm just telling the truth now. I don't have to run for office again, so I can just, let it rip.
Okay, that's the next one we're going to play, is that eye-opener report.
What's in a name?
That you see coming up. Oh, wait a minute. Turn it off. You got it
Which we call
playing.
a rose by any other word would smell as...
Come on. All right. Anyway, actually, we're going to play off my computer next, so Taiwan will be next. The thing that gets me, you notice the double speak they're using? Remember, the national security state, the whole function of the national security state, which is the very top of our power pyramid, the national security state tells the president what to say and what to do. You know, the president is an actor who announces the decision and sells it the best way he can. Now, usually the decisions that he's announcing are nothing that the people want. So he has to lie about them in such a way that people can get behind him. Oh, we're saving children. You know, whatever it is. We're going to go bomb the hell out of the Eastern world because we're saving children. Or we're going to bomb the hell out of everything because we're going to give them democracy. Yeah, something that we don't even value ourselves, something we don't even have ourselves, but we're going to give it to somebody else, right? We're really qualified for that. Well, I just want to, you know, we're coming up on an election cycle, and it just pisses me off that anybody will engage anybody in a conversation about what should we do about ISIS. I'll tell you what we should do about ISIS. Turn tail and get our ass out of there right now and don't look back. Don't stop to rebuild. Don't stop to apologize. Just get out now. The fact is, all they're doing is creating a need for arms. And of course, the people that are creating these laws own the arms companies. That's the military-industrial complex. That's the only reason we're doing this. And it's time for people to stop buying into the arguments about, oh, they're slaughtering Christians, they're cutting heads off of people, they're doing all this stuff. Yeah, they're doing it because we told them to do it. They're doing it because we gave them the arms. If you want to see ISIS stop killing people, stop arming them. Let's make it against the law for any American corporation or anybody affiliated with an American corporation to sell arms to anyone, anywhere in the world. Let's make that totally illegal. When they say that we're protecting somebody, they're lying. When they say that we're in danger, they're lying. You understand? This is a con job. As simple as that. Don't stop to analyze it politically, because that's just how they work the con. The con job is that there is a need for us to go kill people somewhere in the world. We've been doing it non-stop since the beginning of our country. Back in the Vietnam War era, I used to have this list showing that the United States did not miss a single year in military interventions from the time of our founding to the Vietnam War. We did not miss a single year of having our military fighting in some country somewhere in the world. And we've continued that to this day. And they want you to believe that we're a force for good. They're lying. We're not a force for good, we're a force for evil. And the whole country knows it. Everybody knows it. And they look the other way because they don't want to rock the boat. They're getting along fine now, they think, and it's just those other people that are being persecuted. Well, if you don't get it, they're about to create a big martial law thing based on either the Ebola or the ISIS or whatever they're doing. It's just designed to put money in the coffers, and we're arming every single side of the conflict. And we have for years, for decades. Might even say for centuries. We armed the Nazis. That was Prescott Bush, our glorious president's grandfather, George W.'s grandfather. I guess it would be George H.W.'s father. The point is, we have these people that are fascists. Remember, my dad told me, I told you this a while back, World War II. The Germans lost the war, but the Nazis won. And to this day, the Nazis are still in power right now in our own government. If you don't understand that, you're either willfully blind or you're hopelessly ignorant. I mean, hopelessly stupid. If you don't know it by now, you're either not looking at it on purpose because you one level of you knows what's going on and you just don't want to admit it, or you're so bonehead stupid that it wouldn't matter whether you knew it or not. Anyway, I've got a little quick video here to play. On top of all this, the truth is coming out all the time. The Snowden leaks, everything, and they're trying to demonize that as if he did something that put everybody in danger. What it put in danger was the corrupt practices that our higher up government officials engage in are being exposed. That's the only thing that's happening. So we're going to play this. The NSA has decided to reclassify already public information, because if you get around to reading it, because it's declassified, you can read it right now if you want to. They're reclassifying it. I don't know how they get around doing that. Everybody has it on their computers, but it's classified information now. So watch out if you have it on your computer after it's classified. Well, let's go ahead and just play this. Here we go.
Here at InfoWars, we deal with a lot of sensitive information, and to retrieve said information, we often have to go through the Public Information Officer. But don't let the name fool you. It's been my personal experience, as well as the rest of the crew, that the Public Information Officer's job is to give you as little information as possible.
You know what's going on up there, and you want to talk to people and you don't even have a prepared statement? Shame on you. You're criminals. That's a bunch of bullshit. They know what's going on at the Bundy Ranch, and they won't even let a personal information officer, a police information officer, give us any information.
And the people over at Wired.com figured this out as well when they recently tried to retrieve some information from the NSA. They have the article out, NSA Mindbender. We won't tell you what info we already leaked to the media. Who would have thought that trying to obtain information about the information the agency had already given out would lead to such a brick wall? That's what happened when the Federation of American Scientists filed a FOIA request with the Defense Department, which is part of the NSA, earlier this year, seeking information about any authorized leaks of intelligence made to the media during the previous 12 months. The response they got: the document responsive to your request has been reviewed by the agency as required by the Freedom of Information Act and has been found to be currently and properly classified in accordance with Executive Order 13526, which is to say, we won't tell you what information we already put out about ourselves. This is the complete joke of dealing with the government, whether it's a very simple request of something like a police report, how many bullets were shot, surveillance footage. They don't want to give you that. And even the National Security Agency, who Joe Big Show the report, is even spying on you through your phone.
All right, so you get your Android device, wherever your settings button is, click on that settings button, go to General, scroll all the way down to the bottom to wherever it says About Device. Then you're going to go to Legal Information, Open Sources, Licenses. It says you agree that this software is a non-commercially developed program that may contain bugs, and the NSA makes no and hereby expressly disclaims all warranties. Also goes on to says that the NSA will not be liable for any loss of profits or loss of data.
So these guys have these huge NSA data hubs. They won't let you inside. And when you request information, you get these bland responses. If it wasn't for guys like Edward Snowden and Benny, we would never get this intel. But you can get this information and so much more at Infowars.com.
That means no more illegal wiretap.
Okay. I didn't realize it kept going a little bit, but anyway. Okay, so we've got an assault on all different sides, but how about this? This is James Corbett, the Eye Opener report, and this one's called Shut Up, Conspiracy Theorist. This is how you handle a conspiracy theorist, right? Okay, go ahead and play it. 5 minutes, we'll be right back.
They walk among us. They breathe our air, shop at our stores, drive on our streets. They are conspiracy theorists, people who make the outrageous claim that people in positions of power conspire to consolidate and expand that power. Their notions are absurd, their pronouncements are insane, and their ideas are dangerous. As a civilization, we have moved beyond giving hemlock to those who would corrupt our young. In this day and age, we just respond to them in a firm and dismissive manner, making clearly visible to all in the immediate area that this person is a conspiracy theorist, and not to be debated with. Resident expert and 30-year CIA operations officer Dewey Claridge demonstrates.
Don't give me the conspiracy bullshit. Come on, you're a more intelligent man than that. Well, come on. I mean, come on. Listen. There has never been a conspiracy in this country.
This is how to respond to a conspiracy theorist. Quickly, firmly, and disparagingly. To simplify, let's reduce the response to this. Shut up, conspiracy theorist. Observe.
I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
You know, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers and to make that trade-off in medical costs? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist. For variety, the eminently rational Penn and Teller present an alternative response.
We're Penn and Teller, and conspiracy theories are bullshit.
Good job, boys. Let's try again.
If there is any conference which required transparency, which required democratic accountability, it is the Bilderberg Conference.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th.
Good job, Mr. President.
I don't believe in this notion of some sort of secret societies controlling people. But of course, in any political system, there are sort of over the table and under the table arrangements.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
What do you want me to talk about?
Yeah.
A fraud? No, it wasn't a fraud, but I'll be glad to talk to you if you'll shut up and let me talk. Now. The United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation. In one scientist injected plutonium into 18 patients without their knowledge. In another, doctors exposed indigent cancer patients to excessive doses of radiation, a treatment from which it is virtually impossible that they could ever benefit.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Were U.S. government officials aware of drug smuggling in and around the Contra movement? And did they simply choose to ignore it? One U.S. senator says, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind there is a complicity in the flow of drugs into this country, period.
Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Also, were you a member of Skull and Bones from college and Bush? Were you in the same secret society as Bush? Were you in Skull and Bones? Thank you for cutting my mic. Thank you. Are you going to arrest me? Excuse me. Excuse me. What are you arresting me for? Whoa. Don't chase me. I didn't do it. Come over. Ow! Ow!
Any questions? This public service announcement was brought to you by the Friends of the Department of Homeland Security, the Information Awareness Office, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the President's Working Group on Financial Matters, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Rhodes Roundtable Group, and the Bohemian Club. And remember, ignorance is strength. Shut up, conspiracy theorist.
Okay, yeah, shut up, conspiracy theorist. Well, that was kind of a humorous way to get it across to you that, you know, what is the common thread in everything that you just saw? When they were telling the truth, they were told to shut up because they were a conspiracy theorist. Only the lies get through in an Orwellian type of state. Well, okay, we got Chris Hedges and Abby Martin coming up here, and they're going to talk about, remember I mentioned about willful blindness? You decide not to look at something. You willfully ignore something. And then how about the idea of combining crony capitalism and trying to save the world. It doesn't work that way, because crony capitalism will spend all the money it can to prevent you from saving the world, because it means that they make less profit. And I'm talking about climate. The idea of anthropogenic global warming requires reduction of CO2 emissions, and the oil companies and so on are spending big money to the disbelievers, the climate change deniers, are being funded millions and millions of dollars, and they've obscured the conversation to where, you know, the majority of the science says that it is anthropogenic. There's just a tiny minority, and the effect is that it makes it look like there's an actual debate when there really isn't. And capitalism is just going to keep transferring the problem back and forth without ever addressing it. So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip. It's a little bit longer, about 19 minutes. And when we get back, we're going to talk about some local issues, Measure 91. There we go.
The climate change rally in New York City over the weekend drew in at least 400,000 activists, representing the growing awareness of the planet's climate crisis. Yet with such a strong symbol of dissent, one of the main organizing groups of the march, the Climate Group, receives funding from corporations like BP, Goldman Sachs, and Dow Chemical, just some of the companies at the heart of what these activists are protesting. Furthermore, while the protest was historic in numbers, award-winning author and Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges argues that such mobilizations are ultimately ineffective, adding that the main groups that sponsored the march in Manhattan are designed to, quote, neutralize resistance. Well, I was earlier joined by Hedges, and I first asked him why 400,000 people marching in the streets of Manhattan pose no threat to the status quo.
First of all, because there was no agenda. Second of all, because the establishment was part of the march. Groups like Environmental Defense Fund support fracking, get money from oil giants such as BP. They stayed within the perimeters that were given to them by the New York City Police, as opposed to the march that I was part of Monday morning, Flood Wall Street, where without permit, 4,000 people walked out into the streets and shut down the streets on Wall Street, sat down in the middle of the road. So until we begin to engage in acts of mass civil disobedience, especially given the fact that the power elites, in particular the Democratic Party, embrace the rhetoric of climate change, we're not going to make much of a difference. Obama talks about climate change as real and as something that he intends to deal with within his administration, and yet we have seen Obama massively expand drilling on public lands, offshore drilling, fracking, of course, not only approving the southern leg of the Keystone XL pipeline, which is designed to bring down tar sands, shale oil from the Alberta tar fields, but now they've used old existing pipeline to essentially make it possible to ship that oil without building the proposed northern section of the pipeline. We're already seeing that oil be deposited in the Gulf. So the rhetoric of the Democratic establishment in particular doesn't match the reality. The reality is that the political system is captive to the fossil fuel industry, big coal, big oil, big gas, and unless we begin to disrupt the system, they will continue this form of ecocide, destroying what's left of the planet at this point for short-term profit.
And you advocate, of course, direct action, civil disobedience, disrupting the UN. It sounds amazing in theory, but considering the protest zones that exist and how any direct confrontation seems to be met with militarized force, how is that viable? How can we go in there and disrupt these meetings and say, hey, we need real change?
Numbers. I mean, I covered the revolutions in Eastern Europe. When you pull 500,000–600,000 people out into the street, and the police will not use lethal force to quell that demonstration. And remember, I was in East Germany. That Stasi state under Erich Honecker was about as ruthless and brutal as they come. And when 80,000 people started marching in Leipzig in the fall of September 1989, and Honecker sent down elite paratroopers to fire on the crowd, and they wouldn't do it. Honecker lasted another week in power. So I think that we have to begin to discredit the leadership through nonviolent acts of mass civil disobedience, because the system itself is seized up. It doesn't work. It is completely captive to corporate interests, and in particular, the fossil fuel industry. They write our laws, they own our courts, they control the systems of information, in particular the press. They use their money, in essence, to replace the vote. Their lobbyists write our legislation. And so the last mechanisms we have, if we are going to save ourselves as a species, is to disrupt the system. I'm not naive enough to tell you it's going to work, but appealing to the system is not going to work.
Right. And you've written, of course, politics is in the hands of the corporate state. Is anti-politics, real politics have gone underground, is what you're outlining now. How much does the notion of willful blindness play into the concept of political change?
Quite a bit, because in order, I think, to make a very cold and realistic assessment of systems or structures of power, it presents you with a very uncomfortable dilemma. And that is that because you can't appeal to the system to reform itself, that capacity has been taken from us, requires a much more direct confrontation with systems of power. So you see, people who care, Bill McKibben is a good example, care and have sacrificed, Bill for decades over climate change, and yet he will not go up against, certainly in a confrontational way, the Democratic Party. I don't want to in any way take away anything from Bill, who I respect immensely. I just have a different read on the power structure, and I don't think appealing to those segments of the power structure, and I think the Obama administration has proven that point, is going to work.
Yeah, and you've talked about how our agency's been taken away. Capitulating to the system is obviously not working. Of course, this is exemplified in your recent lawsuit against Obama over the NDAA,
right.
In which the government can detain anyone indefinitely if they're believed to be an associated force with terrorism. The Supreme Court, of course, denied to hear the case, Chris. Aside from the sham of the two-party system, even if the system worked perfectly, do you see the judicial branch as a problematic entity in itself?
Well, all of the three branches of government have become captive to corporate power, and we have certainly seen that within the courts that have refused to stand up for our most fundamental constitutional rights. You brought up Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act, in which I did sue the president over it. This permits the military, overturning over 150 years of domestic law, to seize American citizens who are deemed to be members of the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, or something called associated forces, a very nebulous term, and hold them indefinitely, strip them of due process, hold them indefinitely in military facilities, including in our black sites overseas. Now, this is a clear violation of constitutional right, just as wholesale surveillance is a clear violation of our constitutional rights, and yet the courts will not intervene to protect those rights. And so when the lower court, the Southern District Court of New York, ruled in my favor, and the Obama administration challenged it on an appeal, the Second Circuit, the appellate court right below the Supreme Court, rather than deal on the issue, which is kind of black and white in terms of constitutional rights to due process, they ruled that I didn't have standing. I didn't have a right to bring the case, which, when we appealed that decision, the Supreme Court upheld. So that is just a small example of how the courts have been used to essentially eviscerate our constitutional rights by judicial fiat.
Yeah, it just seems like it's become almost emotional blackmail now. How the politics has devolved to now where people are just voting for president so they might pick a Supreme Court justice that might not be fascist. I feel like that's where we are politically right now, Chris. I just think that there's a big problem, even if the Supreme Court justices weren't voting for the corporate state. To have kind of this unelected body there is just problematic. What do you think?
Well, we vote for personalities. We don't even vote on issues. There's a complete continuity on all of the major structural issues, whether it's the failure to curb Wall Street, the failure to enact serious environmental reforms, the failure to curb our lust for imperial war. In fact, Obama's assault on civil liberties have been more egregious than under the Bush administration, and that's because it's the same system. It's a corporate system of power. We've undergone what John Ralston Saul calls correctly a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion. And so, to elect a Democrat in the hopes that they will put, a replacement on the Supreme Court who will not come out of the lunatic fringe of the Republican Party, well, the whole court system has collapsed, especially since 9/11, on the most basic civil liberties. The appellate court, the Second Circuit, is not the Supreme Court, and yet they wouldn't, in essence, take the case on what even the New York Times in an editorial called a clear constitutional issue, or a clear violation of a constitutional issue when they were writing about my NDAA case. So, the court system has collapsed. The press has been consolidated into the hands of a half dozen corporations. We just saw it with the vote on Israel. I mean, here you have Israel carrying out egregious war crimes, attacking a population that has no army, no navy, no air force, no drones, no command and control, no mechanized units, calling it a war, dropping heavy ordnance all over densely populated areas. I mean, I was a war correspondent for 20 years. That's kind of a textbook example of a war crime, and yet 100 senators in a kind of Stalinist-like plebiscite or wind-up dolls for AIPAC all vote that Israel has a right to defend itself. I think that's a kind of window into how bankrupt our system has become. They are just, and that was a vote for campaign contributions for the Israeli lobby, which has a lot of money, and it's a kind of internal collapse. We have the facade of a democratic state, but we no longer have a functioning democracy.
Right. The Israel vote was, I guess it was shocking to see even people like Elizabeth Warren kind of give carte blanche to Israel. But then again, when you sign up for the Democratic Party, you're kind of signing up for that whole MO, Chris. Why is Israel such a third rail aside from this stronghold that AIPAC has over the political system? And why do we never hear about Israel's policy on ISIS in Syria?
Money. I mean, Bernie Sanders, who's not a Democrat, voted with the other 99 senators to, in essence, cheerlead Israel's bombing of hospitals, homes, schools, apartment blocks, children playing soccer on a beach. And that's because the whole system has just been bought off. Our political system is a form of legalized bribery. And that's how it works. And if you can't get that huge infusion of cash, you don't stay in power. Or if you defy corporate interests, these very powerful forces will step in, and now, courtesy of the Supreme Court, they can do so not only in terms of unlimited spending, but they can do so anonymously. They will destroy you. And so, yes, across what's left of the political spectrum, which I would argue is very narrow at this point, you don't deviate. You don't deviate from the establishment policy. I mean, even Bernie Sanders, who is not a Democrat, has supported the attacks against ISIS, has supported the wars in the Middle East. And remember, I spent 7 years in the Middle East. I was the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times. The fundamental problem in the Middle East is that we occupy the Middle East, and they don't want to be occupied. And 13 years of killing and maiming, and we beheaded far more people with drones than ISIS has ever begun to behead, creates these kind of radical, enraged entities, such as ISIS, and that will not go away until we leave. Violence has created the problem. Indiscriminate violence on the part of American imperialism, now spreading out far beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, and of course today into Syria. And it's not worked. It's not worked, and it isn't going to work. Nothing's going to work until we stop occupying that region. And in fact, we are only going to further inflame, further radicalize, further enrage a population that does not want us there. And yet that is not part of the debate. It's not part of the equation. Within the kind of corporate-controlled media, the question is, do we put boots on the ground? Do we send actual soldiers in to carry out intervention, or do we just bomb them? That seems to be the parameters of the debate. And as someone who spent as long as I did in the region, and I'm an Arabic speaker, much of my life in places like Iraq, this is just absurd. It is to ignore the reality of what we've done, to ignore the cultural factors that are there, and to be kind of willfully blind to the consequences of our own misguided intervention and these preemptive wars, which of course are under international law illegal.
Right. I mean, looking at the empire to fix the problem by bombing when it's been caused by the empire bombing, it's this cycle of lunacy, really. I mean, and talking about the corporate media and especially these beheading videos, Chris, I feel like they're acting as the PR arm of ISIS. They're using these videos to galvanize support for bombing the group. Meanwhile, the U.S. has this amazing coalition of the willing joining its recent bombing campaign, including Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, a state that just beheaded 19 people. I'm speechless at the hypocrisy, but I want to get your opinion on it.
Well, of course. I mean, I think last month Saudi Arabia beheaded 30 people, and yet, you know, they were beheaded for things like sorcery, you know, petty theft. So yeah, but you know, we don't anymore have any sense of what's happening within the region itself. It's all become kind of cartoonish. These images, and you know, they are horrifying, of course, and criminal on the part of ISIS in terms of the beheading. That just, it gets sort of thrown at you repeatedly, and you know, a very complex situation which we have largely unraveled. We've destroyed Iraq, of course, as a unified country. The fact that we are now, after 13 years, tacitly allied with both Iran, Hezbollah, which is Shiite, acting as Bashar Assad's air force. I mean, you know, it's completely upended. We're actually working militarily on behalf of the very people that Dick Cheney and George Bush went into the Middle East to destroy. It just shows you the kind of chaos that you know, blind military force has created within the region. But we don't deal in nuance. We don't deal in ambiguity. The coverage has deteriorated immensely. Most of the major newspapers no longer have correspondents there. They don't even make an effort. And the airwaves, it's all sensational garbage. And it's kind of frightening when you marry that kind of willful ignorance, even childlike ignorance about what's happening in the Middle East with the capacity to deliver, you know, in tremendous amounts of industrial violence. It's a terrifying combination.
Yeah, I like that you said it was childlike, because that's how I feel like we're treated when it comes to the corporate media. Even within Israel, I feel like people are given a more fair representation with 972 MAG and S.C.A.D.s. But let's talk about the end goal in Syria, because, I mean, you heard Dick Cheney in 1992 saying, of course, pieces of Iraq are going to fly off if we go in and uproot Saddam. Why is it that it seems like, you know, A, they didn't know what was going to happen, and B, why are we going into Syria now? We know that they wanted to bomb them last year. What is the real end goal here, considering that this is completely unauthorized? There's humanitarian crises all over the regions of the world. Right. What's really happening there?
They don't have an end goal. They don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand the consequences of what they're doing. And so they react instinctively by using force, which they have the capacity to do. If they actually had a rational end goal, they wouldn't be doing this. You know, they bomb, and then things deteriorate and things get worse. We replace Al-Qaeda with, you know, ISIS. If they get rid of ISIS, they'll replace it with something else. It's very similar, by the way, to the way the Israelis have reacted to the Palestinians, where they've that constant use of force and inability to give the Palestinians what under international law they should have, which is their own capacity to have a sovereignty within their own state, has, you know, created further and further or harsher and harsher resistance movements. That, I mean, that's just what happens. That's kind of normal. And you know, the cauldron, the kind of witch's brew that we are unleashing, the idea that you're going to find moderate Syrian rebels, I mean, it's just laughable. There are all sorts of competing interests on the ground. There are tribal interests. There are Kurds. Let's not forget that we have Hezbollah fighting on behalf of Bashar al-Assad within Syria itself. And so, you know, in a kind of bizarre way, we are not only aiding the forces of Assad, but we're aiding Hezbollah itself by bombing ISIS, which has been fighting Hezbollah. I mean, it's kind of nuts.
I mean, I'm sorry to laugh, but it is so insane. You can't even make this up. I don't even know what to say. I mean, let's just wrap this up here. Will the entire world need to become one giant sacrifice zone before people wake up to accepting that revolt is the only meaningful way to change, Chris?
Well, that's what they're doing. And, you know, every climate change report that comes out is even more horrifying than the latest being that the biosphere can no longer absorb carbon emissions and CO2. I mean, and yet the power elites, which of course are completely hostage to the fossil fuel industry, the rational segment of the power elite will speak about climate change and do nothing. The irrational segment, the lunatic fringe of the Republican Party, has just gone insane and will pretend climate change doesn't exist. But meanwhile, nobody is doing anything. And if we are going to leave this planet in any kind of a habitable form for our children and our grandchildren, we're going to have to begin to make massive sacrifices now to carry out massive acts of civil disobedience, because if we trust within the system, it'll kill us.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for your incredible insight as always. Chris Hedges, really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, now that's the problem. You find it any type of corporation. I used to work for a corporation, and I soon found out that the leaders, the people within the corporation come and go, but the monster that the corporation is remains and maybe even intensifies itself. So it's another entity. It actually is another living entity made up of all these individual people, each whom have no particular control over it. So it's like saying, you hear people all the time talking about, oh, somebody ought to shoot that guy, whoever it is. And if you stop and be rational for a minute, you'll realize that there are too many people to kill to make a change. You have to actually change the system. It's not the people that are doing it, it's the system. And the problem with trying to change the system is that you're asking the system to do it. Okay, and it's not very likely to do something that's not in its own best interest. So I don't have an answer for that, but you've got to recognize it for what it is and stop debating with these clowns that think they can do things, based on the result of their debate. Well, okay, now we've got a Measure 91 coming up here in Oregon, and there's a furious debate going on back and forth about, whether we should legalize pot or whether we shouldn't, and it all dodges the question. Of course we should legalize it because it was made illegal based on a lie. And that alone should be enough. Let's undo the lie. Let's be honest. Frankly, all the fear that you see, anybody that has any concern about this issue at all is suffering from what was typically you could see it on Dragnet. If you ever watched Dragnet with Sergeant Friday, when they start talking about pot, that's the type of thing that every one of these opponents thinks about pot. They associate pot with with dissident hippies. Hippies smoked pot. So any other use of pot, it doesn't matter because hippies smoked it. That makes it unforgivable. It's the symbol of our opposition. The hippies who were, opposing the Vietnam War and opposing corruption and stuff like we're supposed to be doing now. But generally, I think our populace has kind of forgotten about their duties as citizens. But we're supposed to be doing that now, and we're not. It's amazing. Well, I'm going to play this real quick. This is Paul Stanford, who has that show on Fridays called Cannabis Common Sense. Just yesterday they had an episode. So this is Paul Stanford at Hempstock 2014 talking about Measure 91, and then we'll come back and I'll talk a little more.
The message I want to get out is that marijuana is good. There's no reason for it to be prohibited. Marijuana is good for us. It's good for our bodies. It helps our health and longevity. It helps the health of our planet. When we stop using petrochemicals and start using hemp for fuel, we're going to change the whole economic paradigm. Instead of our money going into the hands of Exxon, Shell, the Saudi sheiks, the Nigerian despots, and their Swiss bank accounts, the money will be going to our farmers and into our communities and realign our whole economic system. As my late great friend Gatewood Galbraith said, the people who brought us marijuana prohibition are the petrochemical, pharmaceutical, military, industrial, transnational, corporate, elite, fascist sons of a bitches.
Yeah!
Our job is to restore hemp, and that's what this is about. This event is about educating the public, showing that we are not criminals. We are good citizens. We can follow whatever rules they want us to follow.
Do you want me to help you with that?
But we aren't going away.
Yeah.
They're not going to lock us all up. They're not going to continue the lie that marijuana is harmful, because it's not. I look forward to the day when we can openly use cannabis in this park, just like we do in Seattle. This year, we followed these rules to show that we can meet whatever requirements they throw at us.
Even if they suck.
Even if they suck, and they do suck. You know, we have to pay these security guys $25 an hour, each of the 40 of them, to be here 12 hours a day, and they're not under our control, they're under the police's control. The police do not want us to legalize marijuana because they want to keep their gravy train going. They want to continue getting those corrupt dollars. They want to continue seizing our marijuana and our marijuana gardens so they can sell it on the black market and put it into their pensions. They want to seize our property. They want to seize our money. They want to seize everything we've got, and they don't give a shit about us. You know? Well, we're here to tell them that marijuana is a powerful tool that enables us to examine reality and see the truth. And they don't want that. They want to tell us what reality is. They want to tell us that marijuana is a bad thing. But it's a good thing. So we will continue to educate them with truth and with love, because we're good citizens. We've got nothing to be ashamed of. So I want to urge each and every one of you to register and vote. Vote yes on Measure 91. It's a much better bill than they have in Washington. It's a lot better than what they have in California. It'll help us establish a new industry here in this state. Put Oregon on the cutting edge of exciting new economic development. So we need you all to register to vote, and get your family and friends to register to vote, and educate them that this is a good bill. You know, nothing's perfect, but we can't sacrifice the good to the perfect. We've got to take this and vote in favor of it, because it's going to help us open lots of new businesses and restore hemp for fuel, fiber, and food. So I want to thank you all for going through the gauntlet that the city of Portland, and mainly the Portland Police Bureau and their executives, not the officers on the beat, they're our friends, really. But it's those executives that depend on the prohibition dollars that are making us go through these stringent requirements. But we're not going away. We're going to be here, and we are going to prevail. We are going to win. We are going to restore hemp for fuel, fiber, food, and medicine, and adult social use. I want to thank all you folks for coming again. We'll be back here next year at the Portland waterfront, and hopefully we'll pass Measure 91. We'll have adult smoking sections in the park. And we will restore hemp. Thank you all for coming again.
Okay, we've got lots of instances where the government or portions of the government, no matter whether it's local or state or federal government, they're all trying to get their piece of the pie, and they don't care how. Unscrupulous is okay. It doesn't matter. It's amazing to watch the corruption in action. They're not above making money off the lowest part of our society. You know, that's exactly immoral. That's backwards from the way it's obscene. It shouldn't be that way. Here's another example. In jail, they used to be able to, you know, the family of a person in jail used to be able to take money in, and there's an account they could have so they can go to the jail's commissary and buy candy bars or toothpaste or whatever they need. And somebody came up with the great idea and said, hey, there's millions of these patients that are getting money, and you know, I think I should have some of that myself. So they put themselves in between the people giving the money and the people receiving the money, and they charge 45% to do it. It's like PayPal, only 45% fee. Can you believe that? Off the weakest, poorest people there are, prisoners. I mean, people are just absolutely unscrupulous, and the fact that our society allows this to happen, shame on you, shame on me, shame on us all. So, okay, we're going to play this clip here. This is from Normal, and they're going to tell you why prohibition is ridiculous, and I think we might already know, but let's go for it, folks.